In this video, we'll be talking about intercoolers, and we will dive into the great debate of top mount intercooler versus front mount intercooler. Now, before we start diving in, if you're a little fuzzy on the whole deal about intercoolers and how they work, I have written a very lengthy article about intercoolers, and you can find that on 55garage.com. I will leave links down in the description to that article, so if there's anything that we are talking about today and you're not really for sure what I am talking about, hopefully that article will explain it enough that you can come back to this video and it'll all make sense to you. But as we're getting started, and we should cover our bases, I'm going to talk about what an intercooler is and what it actually does. Allow me the opportunity to explain the actual job that an intercooler does. Now, when the turbo compresses the air, it gets hot. And hot air isn't the best way to make power because it is less dense. And what I mean by less dense, it does not have a lot of oxygen molecules in it. When you cool the air, you increase the air density, and that means it has the ability to have more oxygen molecules in it. What all that means is the cooler the air, the more fuel you can pack into it, and the more fuel you pack into that air means more power. So the intercooler's job is to basically cool the air that's coming off the turbo so you can pack a lot of fuel into it so you can make a lot of power. Now that I've explained how an intercooler works, we can get into one of the problems that you're facing with a top-mounted intercooler, and that is heat soak. And heat soak happens because the intercooler is made of aluminum. It's sitting on top of the engine, a hot engine at that. So all of that heat is rising up, and the intercooler sitting right there is basically its job is a giant heat sink. So it's taking that hot air from the turbo and it's cooling it down to send it into the engine. Well, since it's sitting on top of a hot engine and it's made of aluminum, it's going to soak up that heat. And now you're compounding it with the heat from the compressed air from the turbo, and then that just drops efficiency all across the board. Even as the car is moving and you're getting air going over it, it has soaked up so much heat that it cannot dispel the heat that is in the core. So when you add hot air from the turbo, it's not doing its job effectively at all. So one of the reasons why people want to ditch the top mount intercooler and go to a front mount is the front mount is less prone to getting heat soaked because it is down in the front. It's not sitting on top of the engine, and as soon as you begin to move, it's getting, cooler air from outside the car flowing through it immediately. So it has a better chance of getting rid of all that heat that it has soaked up. So that leads us into the top mount versus front mount debate. As we begin this whole debate deal, know that there are some misconceptions out there, and I don't know if it's because of lack of information or people just generally don't understand, so it's part of the reason why I wanted to make this video. So you can make power with a top mount intercooler. If you're using a stock top mount intercooler and you are modded, you are going to have some problems. And the reason why is the stock top mount intercooler, it's fine if you're at stock or near stock, but as soon as you start modding, you're going to run into issues. And it's partially due to the way that the OEM top mount intercooler is made. There are two ways that you can make an intercooler core. It's tube and fin, and then there is bar and plate. The OEMs are always going to go with the tube and fin design because number one, it's lighter, so it saves them on some vehicle weight. But number two, and the most important, is it's cheaper to make. So even though the car is a performance car, the OEM's going to cut corners where they can in order for them to A, not spend a lot of money, and B, maximize profit. So when you start modding this car, you will run into issues where as soon as you turn up the boost pressure, meaning you're going to start making more heat, that OEM cooler is not going to keep up. If you live somewhere where it's very warm, like here in Illinois, we see temperatures in the summer sometimes in excess of 100 degrees. If you're running a Mazdaspeed 3 in Illinois with a top mount intercooler, you're going to heat soak that cooler so bad after you have done maybe, I want to say like about anywhere from like 3 to 5 pulls. Even though you're driving the car and you're moving air through that cooler, it's going to get heat soaked, and it takes a while to dissipate all that heat that gets soaked into the core. Now, you can mitigate this if you get an aftermarket intake from someone, say like CPE, and it's a bar and plate design, because bar and plate is more resistant to heat soak than tube fin is. As well, I know CPE includes heat shields that go underneath their top mount intercooler, and what that does, that is helping to not have heat soak into that intercooler. So like I said, there are ways to make power with a top mount intercooler. I know the CPE unit is a drop in, it's just a remove and replace, so everything lines up. You don't have to get any new hoses, you don't have to get any tubing, you're not going to have issues with space requirements. I know that the shroud that goes over the intercooler on the stock one you won't be able to use, but I mean that's a given. Nutshell, yes, you can make power with a top mount intercooler. Now on the flip side of that is the front mount intercooler, and come on guys, let's be honest, we all know why we want a front mount intercooler. It's so you can roll up, and the first thing people see when they see your car pull into the meet or wherever you're going is you got that big old front mount intercooler in the front, and you're getting mad street cred. Don't lie and say that you're doing it for the performance or any other reason. You know it's for the street cred when people see that big ass intercooler. Front mount intercooler. And I've already kind of gotten into one of the reasons why you want to swap to a front mount intercooler. It's just because it is less prone to getting heat soaked because it's sitting down in front of the engine, and there is nothing really near it that is going to cause that to get heat soaked. I mean, the radiator's there, but the radiator's behind it, and there's a decent air gap between the two, so heat soak is less likely. Now, a front mount intercooler comes with its own problems as well. I say more things that you need to be aware of when you get a front mount intercooler versus just getting an aftermarket top mount intercooler. And it's like, as I was talking before about having that big honking intercooler in the front, you have to be aware of size. You can actually get an intercooler that is bigger than what your turbo can support, and it's going to increase your lag. And one of the reasons why is because the top mount intercooler, you can look at it, and even though you have the couplers, the runs are very short. So you're going to have a minimal amount of lag, if any, because there's just not enough piping for there to cause lag. When you go with a front mount intercooler, you first have to take the outlet, and the outlet has to run over the top of the engine, down the side, and then turn around and go to the front. That's one run. And then you actually have your hot side that has to run from the front of the car. It has to go up, and then it then gets routed back up into the engine compartment back to the turbo. So you are adding a much longer path for air to travel. When you add a big intercooler, and one that's way too big for your turbo, because if you're still running a stock KO4, you don't really need that big of an intercooler. But you have to remember, not only have you added these runs of tubing and couplers, you also added something new into the system, which is the intercooler. And depending on its size, it can take a while to get that intercooler charged with air. That's where the lag comes from. If you have too big of an intercooler and you got this small little KO4, you're going to be on that KO4 for a minute, and it's going to raise the point at which the turbo will start to spool effectively, because you're trying to move so much air, a large quantity of air, to try to get that intercooler charged with air before everything starts flowing freely. That's how you increase lag. So when you get a front mount intercooler, you need to make sure that you get it sized properly. As well, your tubing size matters also, because if you are trying to run an intercooler, and for instance, let's say you're new to this and you see that the inlets on the intercooler are 3 inches and you think that you need to run 3-inch pipe all the way through your intercooler setup. Well, you need to be aware that 3-inch tubing supports up to 700 horsepower. It's a ridiculous amount of CFM that those tubes can support. And meanwhile, you're still using this little dinky KO4 turbo. If you think you're not going to experience lag with that setup, you are in for a rude surprise, because I would be shocked. I'd be shocked if that turbo spooled under 5,000 RPM. Tube sizing is important. Intercooler sizing is important, because if you're not careful and you don't do your homework, you will increase the lag so bad that you will think almost that something's wrong with the car, because it never used to take this long to spool. So those are things you need to keep in mind with a front mount intercooler. So with all that said, in the great debate of the top mount versus front mount intercooler, the answer is it actually depends on you personally on what you are going to use your car for. There's really not a one-size-fits-all answer. There isn't. So it all comes down to personal preference. Like I tell you guys, when you ask me questions about whether this or that is better, it comes down to personal preference and the way that you're going to use your car. Now, with all that said, hopefully you guys learned something today and you liked the video. And if you did, make sure you click that like button. As well, make sure you are subscribed to the channel. I really enjoy doing these types of videos, and there will be more. I have already gotten a lot of questions about high pressure fuel pump internals. Yes, I know I talked about that in the previous need to know video, but this next one is going to be all about high pressure fuel pump internals. So I'm currently working on that. As you guys see, I got my little notebook right here, and I'm writing down all of the comments and the questions you guys asked me, so that when I do the research, I will have everything right there, and then we can dive into that one as well. Also, make sure you guys are following me on social media, Instagram, Facebook, Patreon. I got some new videos going up on the Patreon site with some behind the scenes stuff on the Miata build. So if you guys are interested in that, make sure you check that out. Make sure to check out my website. As we're starting to get into the winter months, I won't be in the garage as much, so I will be doing more written content, articles and such, providing background information for when I do videos like the intercooler article I did for this video. With all that said, I'm going to end the video right here. I hope you all are staying safe, you are having a happy holiday season, and I will see you guys on the next one.